All right, hey guys. First off, I'd like to thank the GSA for having me, and Adam and Jen and Ishan. We're just here to give a little bit of an informal presentation followed by a more informal discussion of our internship experiences that we've all had. We've had a pretty diverse group of internships. But I'll let them tell you more about their experiences once I'm done telling you about mine. So the title of my talk is Why I Did an Internship and Why You Should Too. And I threw this little meme up here of Buddy the Elf because this is how I felt before the internship. And as I was making these slides, I started feeling like this again. It's a very exciting opportunity that not a lot of people pursue, but I hope that by the end of this talk, you guys are feeling this way as well. So really quick, the agenda for today is going to be as follows. I'm going to tell you a bit about why I did an internship. I'm going to tell you what I got out of it. I'm going to give you some data as motivation for why you might want to pursue an internship. Going to tell you why you should do an internship in more explicit terms. Going to give you some good first steps for finding that great opportunity. And then I'm going to give a few closing remarks, and then we're going to have our panel discussion. All right? Okay, well, let's get started. So before I get into it, I'm going to answer the question that I know is burning into all of your minds right now. And that's, who's this guy telling me to do an internship? That's me. My name's Joe Tilley. I am a member of the Dr. Kahn and Dr. Spontak's research groups. I did my bachelor's degree at UMass, and then I came down here to NC State for my PhD. I'm a fourth year right now, and I recently did a summer internship at Eastman Chemical Company. And that's the experience that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So, with this recent internship, why did I do it? I mean, people can have a lot of motivating factors that go into making decisions, and it really boiled down to three factors for me as to why I decided to do this internship. I wanted to learn valuable skills. I wanted to gain insight into industrial research, which is very different from academic research, and it also is nothing like that picture there. And it was an opportunity that was given to me through my funding source, so, I mean, to me it was a no-brainer. And what did I get out of it? This is, I think, the most important part of an internship. You know, you go and you help a company out, but really you do it to gain skills for yourself, to make yourself a better candidate for when you guys go out and start looking for jobs. So, sorry. What did I get out of it? Well, first off, I made valuable contacts at the company, and this sounds, I mean, all of these sound pretty cliche, I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to flesh them out a bit more. These valuable contacts that I made, I'm still in contact with them. I've had a phone call, a number of phone calls with my mentor at Eastman, and he's helped me work through a few problems that I've had with my own PhD research. I learned a number of new technical skills that have translated directly to my PhD research. And those are just, you know, new techniques. Those are new ways of analyzing data, just things that I learned and I could bring back and use to directly help my own project and, you know, make the pathway to graduation a bit quicker and a bit smoother. Most importantly, I learned a number of soft skills, and learned and honed these soft skills in an industrial setting that I believe really helped make me a better researcher. And some of those are teamwork. That's not really something that's emphasized in PhD programs because you have your own project, you own that project, and you make all of the decisions, you know, unless your advisor is type A. You make all the decisions regarding that project and the direction that it takes. A little bit different in industry. Communication skills. We all present at group meetings, we present at meetings, national meetings for conferences, but communication in industry is a little bit different. Oftentimes people are very busy, so you have to take your entire body of information and condense it down to 1 or 2 slides, or what could be covered in a 3 to 5 minute conversation with your mentor, because they are going to be very busy. I've also, it helped me with decision making. There were a few days where I got pulled off of my main project because there was an oh crap moment where something was going wrong, and I got pulled into a team where we had to quickly troubleshoot a problem, because in most online processes, every minute that something is going wrong is costing the company lots and lots of money. So there were a few instances where I had to help troubleshoot these problems and make decisions on the fly very quickly. And then finally, it helped me with short-term problem solving and decision making. With a PhD, typically you're on a project for 3 to 5 years, and you can kind of explore every single facet of the problem that you think is interesting. Doesn't quite work like that in industry. You really have to decide, out of these 10 variables that you're interested in looking at from an academic perspective, what are going to make the biggest difference. So, doubling back to the teamwork, you are going to be working in teams when you do research in industry, and an internship can help give you experience in those team settings, and can really, again, another cliche, can help you learn how it's done in industry, because it is very different than how it's done in academia. And I mean, if for no other reason, it looks good on a resume, right? And the biggest take-home point that I got from my internship was that in industry, only profitable science survives. So this goes back to decision making, figuring out what factors are the most important to look at, what is most critical to ultimately develop a product as quickly as possible. So this is the obligatory data that I promised you guys. So Dr. Allis had another graduate student, Steve Barilovitz, do a survey of previous and current graduate students. And this chart is a bit confusing, I know, but we have exit employment data for graduate students up to 2013. And what we can see is that, depending on the year, more people went to industry or got a postdoc. But if you get up here to 2015 and beyond, those are projected or desired employments. So surveys went out to graduate students, and they said what they want to do, where they want to go. And the vast majority of people have said they want to go to industry, which is great. But there's a bit of a caveat to that. This was a quote from a recent email that I received. I don't know if you guys got it, from Laura DeMars about basically selling the A2I program, which from what I understand is a great experience. Y'all should apply. The highlight here is that graduate students often lack the business and professional skills that companies seek, and they often have difficulty adjusting to the corporate environment. Which makes sense, right? If you've been in academia for 5 years doing academic research, almost in vacuo, you're not going to have the context for your research necessarily. And an industrial, especially an industrial internship, can help give you context and give you an opportunity to do research in an environment where it is driven by tangible goals in a more short-term, more tangible short-term goals. Sorry, you can tell I haven't practiced this much. So yeah, an internship will help kind of give you focus and give you perspective that you may not otherwise get in just doing your PhD. And it will ultimately help set you apart from other candidates when you go applying for jobs. So speaking of applying for jobs, ACS, or the Council on Chemical Research, did a survey, sent out a bunch of surveys to employers in industry about things that they look for in their hires, things that they want in the ideal candidate. And self-motivation ranked very highly, of course, but we're all PhD students. We have to be self-motivated because oftentimes there aren't people looking over your shoulder the whole time. But problem-solving skills, being a team player, professionalism, and communication. These are 4 very important traits and qualities that can be, they can benefit very strongly from doing an internship experience. And like I said before, everyone has to communicate their research, but communication in industry, again, is a slightly different animal. Professionalism, you will get a much more complete flavor of professionalism if you go and do an industrial internship. And being a team player, these are all things that you can practice, you can hone, and then ultimately you can put on your resume as demonstrated skills if you go and you do an internship opportunity. So now, the second part of my talk. Why should you seek an internship? Pretty much the same reasons I did, right? You can improve your technical and soft skills, especially communication and teamwork in a corporate environment. Teamwork especially, this is a big thing. There was a lot of, in my internship, there was a lot of emphasis put on teamwork and how well people work together. And from my firsthand experience, I can tell you that people who work well in teams and can get on well with other people, they thrive. They climb the ladder and they're able to succeed professionally. And those that don't, they have a much tougher time in advancing anywhere beyond a bench chemist. You also get to learn about the interplay between market factors and innovation. This is a fancy way of saying you get a business perspective. You can learn about how the company's mission, the corporate mission, and the corporate culture play into every single decision that is made on the technical end. Because ultimately, it's nice to think that innovation is driven by people who are just interested in the science, but ultimately those decisions are made by people who are looking at the bottom line, and they want to make as much money as possible, and so they are the ones who are saying, or ultimately directing research thrusts. Also, internships can sometimes be used as a tryout, right? Both for the intern as well as the company. You go there and you work for 3 months, 6 months, however long you're able to stay, and you get a feel for the culture there, and they get a feel for you, and they get to kind of decide whether or not you would be a good fit for a full-time position there. And this was made explicitly clear to me during my internship. I was, I don't want to say hounded, but my advisor, our mentor, asked me several times point blank if I would be willing to come work for Eastman. at the end. And I'm not saying that's representative of all internships, that was just my experience. But it can be seen as a tryout for both parties. And also, finally, work experience on your resume never looks bad, right? It was the same thing in undergrad. If you had an internship, it set you apart from other people who did not do internships. And it's the same thing in graduate school. It's just one more experience that not everyone else is able to do. And if you can do it, it will set you apart. It will make your resume stand out a bit more from everyone else. And ultimately, it might help you get that first round interview, and then you can go on and pursue the job. Okay, so now I've told you about my internship. I've told you why you should do an internship. How do you do an internship? First thing, and I can't stress this enough, is you need to get approval from your advisor or advisors. If you don't do that, it's never going to happen. Or if you decide you don't care about what your advisor has to say, it's not going to make for a good working relationship once you get back. There are some caveats that go into planning the timing of internships. I ran into this actually. My internship ran a little long, and I got back and I didn't have health insurance for a semester. So that sucked. But yeah, if you keep your advisors fully apprised of your situation, they should ultimately be able to help you, or at least give you the green light to go ahead and pursue these opportunities. And when you get back, you won't have compromised your working relationship. So once your advisor says yes, the next thing you need to do is locate a position you're interested in. And our department, I think, is uniquely positioned to help you do that. We have a lot of funding coming through industry. Yo, what up? Hey! So yeah, we have a lot of funding coming through industry, and a lot of our professors have contacts through industry. So if you decide you want to do an internship, reach out to either your advisor or other professors in the department, and they should be more than willing to help you. At least get a contact or locate a position. If that doesn't quite fit in with what you want to do, there are also a number of career fairs that occur here on campus, as well as in the greater Triangle area. So you can go to those, find online listings. We get emails that are circulated through the department every once in a while. Take a look at those, and if you see something you like, throw your hat in the ring. But before you do that, before you apply, you want to make sure you reach out to someone at the company. You can imagine for jobs just as internships, if you just throw a resume at some internship where you have no connections at all, it might fall on deaf ears, so to speak. Use your LinkedIn connections, meet up with someone, offer to buy them a cup of coffee, just kind of talk to them about their experience at the company. Maybe it's a former intern, maybe it's someone who is currently working at the company. But LinkedIn can be a very powerful tool, so use it. And then ask them point blank if you can name drop, because that helps. So once you've reached out, you've identified a position, you've reached out to someone at the company, you're ready to apply. Create a tailored resume. Not all resumes are created equal, and for different positions you want to kind of structure your resume so that it reflects the skills or the attributes that the company is explicitly looking for. And also include a cover letter. If you made a contact, name drop that contact in the cover letter. And then once you're all done with that, you can go ahead and apply. All right, so a few final tips from one guy. You'll hear more tips from other people who've done internships in a couple of minutes. The first is cast a wide net in your search. You don't have, your internship doesn't have to be exactly related to what you do. I work on thermoset coatings without any fillers, and my internship was working with fully pigmented paints, and I do nothing that relates to adhesion or corrosion or any of that. And my first 3 weeks were spent relearning electrochemistry. That kind of stuff is okay. That could even be seen as a plus. You're going in and you're broadening your skill set. You're learning more things, which is never a bad thing. Once you get your internship, attend and contribute in as many meetings as you can. And this is one thing that I did almost shamelessly. I asked to go to pretty much every single meeting that my mentor went to. And for the first couple of weeks, I would just sit there and I'd take notes. And then after that, I was able to kind of figure out the direction that these various projects and these various groups were trying to go in. And I was able to actively contribute. And that makes a big difference. People who speak up in meetings tend to do better professionally. It's not something that should be overlooked or really can be overstated. You need to, once you get an opportunity, you need to go there and make the most of it. Meet with people in different roles within the company. This is also important because if you're considering the company as a potential employer, and they're considering you as a potential employee, from their perspective, if you meet with other people within the company, it's a good way to show that you're genuinely interested in the different facets of what they do. And for you, it's a good way to figure out, maybe this one thing that you're doing for your internship, this one group, isn't a perfect fit, but there might be other things within the company as well that you might enjoy doing more. You can also just learn more things this way. I ended up meeting with the analytical chemistry department a lot, and I learned a lot about XPS, which, I knew nothing about XPS. I still don't know a whole lot, but I know enough to be dangerous now. I met with a couple of lawyers just to learn about the whole patent process. That was very insightful. I learned a lot from that because that's one thing that not everyone gets access to in graduate school. Learning about protecting ideas and how innovation plays into, again, the corporate mission. Meet with the business guys, try to figure out what is driving these decisions that are ultimately shaping the way that research is done at the company. So you can also, you should also take on as much responsibility as you can. This shows initiative, and this will also potentially put you in contact with more people at the company. This is a great way to demonstrate your willingness to help. It highlights that you can contribute as long as you do it well. Don't bite off more than you can chew. But yeah, you could end up getting involved in tangential projects that are related to what you're doing for your internship. And you can also, I know I say this a lot, but you can learn a lot of great things by just taking on more responsibility, being willing to step out of your comfort zone. And that, ultimately, when people look to hire PhDs, they hire you for expertise, yes, but they also are interested in your general skill set as a problem solver. And taking on a lot of responsibility can help you highlight that. And I guess that brings me to the next point. Step out of your comfort zone, because you will learn more. Like I said, I spent the first 3 weeks of my internship teaching myself electrochemistry. I was hoping after Gen Chem 2 that I would never see electrochemistry again. And yeah, unfortunately that didn't happen. But I learned a lot, and it turns out that I enjoyed the electrochemistry part. And that became a really big part of my final technical report that I had to file with the company. And last, but definitely not least, ask lots of questions. You guys, you're gonna be, for an internship experience, no one expects you to know everything. Companies do things very differently than we do here in our academic labs. So ask questions, why do we do it this way? Why not do it this way? What is the goal of this ultimate thrust that we're engaged in right now? These are the kinds of questions that will not only help you get a better sense of the research environment that you're in, but they'll also highlight to your employer that you really care to know more, and that the value of that, I don't think, can be overstated. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys for coming and listening to me talk for a bit. I'd like to thank Dr. Kahn and Dr. Spontak. They were very supportive. Dr. Inglefield, who set the internship up, Dr. Webster, who was my mentor, Dr. Ollis for his data, and then the World Wide Web for my memes. And now I'd like to bring up to the front the panelists. Jen Clark, who did her internship at Sandia National Lab. Ishan back there, who did his internship at the MIT Lincoln Lab. And Adam Mishler down front here, who did his internship at Genentech. I'd also like to add one more panelist, Dishit Parekh. He did where'd you do your internship?
Texas Instruments.
At Texas Instruments, and he will be able to field questions for students who are international and may have to navigate the different challenges that go along with that, from visa status to working in something that may not be related to your PhD research. Let's see if we can get you guys some chairs, huh? Thank you, guys.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Clark. I went to Sandia National Labs over the summer, and I guess if I were to pin down why I decided to do that, well, one, because I realized that my field is a lot larger than just my project or this department or the people I interact with. So I had an opportunity of interacting with a lot of other world-class people in the same sort of field doing similar things. And then they're actually also working on really cool things that I was able to meet with random people. Everyone was willing to talk to you. So it was like a really enlightening opportunity where I had a lot of those connections that Joe was talking about. Also, it was a good opportunity for me to kind of try out living on another part of the country. So Sandia National Labs is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So yeah, it was nice living there. I liked it a lot. What was the other thing? Is that it? All right, cool.
So you guys know, I'm Ishan. I had my internship with Lincoln Laboratories, which is a DoD-run laboratory, but it's operated by MIT. So it's sort of like in between a national lab and a university setting. And it's operated by MIT, but it's entirely different. So it's imagine if there was a national lab that was being operated by NC State, but it was out like way past Durham or something like that. So it wasn't on MIT's campus, but it had MIT's name on it. And I worked on things related to microfluidics. It's as much as I can really talk about in terms of what I did. And what I gained the most out of it was being independent and efficient.
I'm Adam Mishler. I did my internship at Genentech. It was kind of a different field of what I do now. So one thing I want to emphasize is that don't be afraid to apply to a different field. It may be harder to apply if you're doing like materials to apply to bio or something like that. But in my field, I do hard like stem cell engineering, and I went into molecular oncology is the department I was in. So don't be afraid of, I've never done cancer before, I can't apply to a cancer place, but I got it, so don't be afraid to do that, is one thing I'd point out. The reason why I did the internship is I wanted to know what industry's like. So one thing I'm constantly struggling with is, do I want to do a postdoc, maybe go to an advanced field, maybe go to academia, or do I want to go into industry right away, or do a postdoc and then industry? I'm constantly struggling with it even now, and I'm almost done. So just did it this past summer, and it was a great experience. I would recommend it for everyone. Some advisors may be more open to it than others, but I would recommend that you all try to and beg your advisor to do it. And then lastly, I would advise you to do it maybe a year before you're done, so that way you have as much research experience as possible.
My name is Dishit Parekh. I'm currently a 5th year student in the department, and I did my internship last semester. So I spent around 7 months actually working at Texas Instruments in their Kilby research labs. So the reason why I chose that internship was, so I was studying into 3D printing electronics, and I looked up the companies which work on that, and they were like only startups or Google X. And I can't enter Google X as an international student right now. And they were like Tesla is doing something, and again SpaceX is doing, but I cannot go to those companies. So I started reaching out to my connections on LinkedIn to see like which other big companies do work like this, because I wanted to decide whether I want to go into academia or industry after I graduate. And I was thinking that 3D printing electronics is something which is still very immature of a concept, and people in academia do it more than industry. But I was proven wrong when I went to Texas Instruments. And the best part about that internship was the collaborative work I got to do. Like I was in a research lab which had 90 engineers, and I was the only chemical engineer that they had in the entire research labs. So everyone used to come to me for materials question. I was called the Scotch tape guy because I helped use Scotch tape for some applications, and it blew up their minds that what a Scotch tape can do. And
Double-sided tape?
yeah, double-sided tape, sorry. Double-sided Scotch tape. And they're like, oh yeah, it brings a new set of skills in the organization now, that I'm a material scientist, chemical engineer who knows electronics, who knows 3D printing. So it added one more facet to my profile that, okay, now I can actually talk to electrical engineers on the same wavelength as them, no pun intended. And finally, I spent a lot of time there. I spent 7 months. It wasn't easy to be an international student and still be able to go on such a long internship. But there are ways to navigate through that. And if there are specific questions that you guys have, I can answer more. And now that I finished my internship, I'm back in the lab, I can do things more independently in terms of how I approach my project and fail fast. That was like the thing I learned from my internship. It's a research lab where I worked in a company, and no one has 5 years to prove a concept. You have 6 months. And they had a Shark Tank-like environment there. So in 6 months, if you don't show something to the higher management, the project is killed, or you get $1 million. So it could be either way, and you're actually contributing to the profit and loss of a company. So you feel that you are driving the stocks up also. So you don't get that kind of atmosphere when you're a grad student. So it's pretty.
For the record, he didn't engage in any insider trading.
Yeah. And sorry, one more thing to add. I think Joe mentioned that about the patent disclosure. That kind of environment you only get in industry. So like I was fortunate enough to submit 2 disclosures during my time there, and the lawyers help you to navigate the whole process, and you get a deeper insight that how do you actually protect your information, your ideas. Here we are in a grad school, it's a collaborative environment, but when you step out, things are very different.
Okay, so now I guess we'll open the floor to questions. If you guys have any. Jenna?
So this is kind of for all of you guys, and I know you probably can't go into specifics about your project, but I guess I wanted to know more like if you guys jumped in on a project that was already going on, or did you have your own separate project, or like how did you fit in, I guess, as an intern and not like a full researcher or something like that?
So my project was actually being pursued by a postdoc that found a industry position and then left. So I was kind of brought in to pick up that slack, and it was part of a larger team. So it was a 3-year grant that's actually still ongoing. I'm continuing to work with them, so it's pretty nice. But yeah, so I had my own project. I was working independently to kind of try to take the weight off of my mentor, and I got to work with a lot of experimentalists and other people as well.
Yeah, my project, it's trying to make sure I phrase it properly because I'm not supposed to talk too much about it. But it was in some ways a follow-up of a different project, but it was more of a budgetary thing where that the type of project that I was hired for, it sort of had like some exploratory, like money for exploratory things. So I was hired because I had certain skill sets that would allow our group to do some exploratory studies related to some other projects in the group. And similar to this, it was a nice opportunity for me because I was the only chemical engineer as well. And so I really had to run my electrical engineering hat on.
My project was kind of assigned by my manager. So Genentech's a little bit different than probably a lot of other companies. So their research department is very academic-like. They publish papers, and they put a lot of money into the research side of things. They also try to, develop new antibodies and drugs, but a lot of times it's through papers that they publish in that. And so what my project was kind of based off a paper that was published a few years back, and I kind of wanted to adapt it to kind of some of the drugs that Genentech is developing and create a killing assay, so to view how good that drug kills cancer cells. And so that was basically the project that I had. I wanted to tackle more because I got to work right away, but a lot of times sometimes things will work and sometimes things won't. And you have a limited amount of time to do those things, and I think that's the hardest part in an internship is it seems like you finally get the hang of things and you're leaving, is what I kind of found out, but it was a good experience.
Quick question for Adam. The papers that Genentech publishes, are those published after patent disclosures are filed?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of times they're just identifying different things, but if they're looking at certain drugs that they're developing, they definitely do a patent before they,
Okay.
yes. But a lot of times they're very academic-like they're looking at the signaling pathway of blocking a certain pathway in a cell or a cancer cell and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a brief background of the research labs that I was in. So it's called Kilby Research Labs, and there are around 80 to 90 engineers, and there are multiple projects. Every project has only 3 to 5 engineers working on it. And the success ratio of each project has to be less than 10%. Only then they will pursue the project. So it has to be the most challenging projects that they can work on. Otherwise, they wouldn't work on it. And the people who work there, they all have PhDs in specific research areas. So they're brought in the organization because of their PhD skill set. And this new project that I was working on, which I can't disclose more, but it's about 3D printing electronics. And they wanted someone who had that system level knowledge from material side, that okay, how do we print different materials and how the substrate interactions would occur. And the electrical engineers had their PhDs on the mechanics of 3D printing, like how to build the electronics, how to build the whole printer. But no one really had hands-on knowledge on how different materials get extruded through a printer. So they were looking for an intern who has like a PhD level background for materials as well as who has worked on this technique at the same time. And that's how I got roped in. And there was no position actually when I reached out to my LinkedIn connections. So that was a great point from Joe. Reach out to your LinkedIn connections, talk with them. And funnily, I reached out to this gentleman at the research labs, and he's like, I have met you 3 years back. And I was like, I don't recollect that. He's like, I was in a presentation that you gave at a conference. And I was in the first row and asked you a lot of questions. I was like, sorry, I still can't recollect. Back in 2014, I was a grad student who was giving a presentation for the first time in America in a conference. I was very nervous, so I missed you. But he's like, no, I've been following your work since then. So there could be people like that who just kind of follow your work, sitting outside academia, and then when the time is right and you approach them, things have to match up. And hence I took that position. So Sunday night I messaged on LinkedIn to that gentleman. Tuesday morning I had my internship. So that was like very fast. They're like, okay, you exactly match with the skills that we need for this internship. So it was a very project specific. But I will say that it was open-ended in terms of what I wanted to work on. So I had my own project in that organization or in that research lab. At the same time supporting the business unit, because at the end of the day it's not a non-profit organization. You have to do something which gives dollars to them. So.
I want to follow up a little bit what we should talk about in terms of the importance of networking, and it's not just about searching on Google or LinkedIn in terms of finding an internship. In Nishit's case, he was sort of approached because some history back. Joe and myself both, at least I interviewed for the position before the position even existed. And
The position I got had my name on it.
right,
So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes, it's not just about looking for internships and applying to them. You need to reach out to people and actually talk about it. To talk to them in terms of if they'll have something coming up, or if they know someone else that can get you in touch with them. So I think it's critical, and that's similar for when you're later down the road when you're looking for jobs.
But that advice is still true for reasons to go to career fairs or other events like that. So that's how I got my internship, is that I spoke to someone from Sandia at a booth, and then he was coming here for a talk with the mechanical engineering department, and then we sat down for a few minutes afterwards, and then he passed my resume around, and it took a couple months, but then they ended up putting a position online that was meant for me. So also don't be disheartened that if you're applying to things online and not hearing anything back, because it could just be one of those types of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of positions, I would claim more than 50% positions put out there, they're meant for specific people. So if you apply, you're going to get rejected if you are not meant for the position. That happened to me I don't know, hundreds of times. I applied to way too many positions before I realized how the game works. And at a TI as well, they made a position for me and told me to apply to that position. They have to put up a position so that everyone has a fair opportunity to apply, but they know that I will
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that. It's what if he fit well skill set wise, and they dug in a little bit and found out he was a shady guy. And this is not that shady, but it's, you may not be outright rejected, but you may not hear back a lot of times because they might have one or two people in mind, and then if that doesn't follow through, they don't want to reject someone and then lose out on their chance to hire someone.
Yeah, I think I'm the odd duck in that I just applied to a few places and got the one I wanted. One thing I'd say is only apply to places that you want to work for. Don't just apply to a place to have an internship. Work for a company that you want to work for. I know Genentech has been on my radar since I was an undergrad. I've always wanted to work there. So it was kind of that dream job that I always wanted to get and go after. So go for a company like that. And if you don't get it, then try and make contacts so you can get it maybe the following year or something like that, or when you graduate and apply then.
Austin?
Do you think, say you wanted to get a job in industry and you got an internship in a government organization or something of that sort, do you think it's best to get an internship in industry if you want to get into industry? Or I guess, should you intern in the kind of field or organization you want to someday join? Or are they all looked upon pretty much favorably?
I guess for me, I feel like Joe's description of what it was like working in industry was a little bit different than my experience in the national lab, because it's the same sort of thing as here, where it's more like grad school for adults. Because it's like in the same way they're writing grants and stuff, but you're just surrounded by people that actually know like a lot about what they're doing because it's their job, because they're not like splitting their time with teaching and stuff. But I mean, I still worked with big groups like he was talking about. It's still a corporate type environment, so I mean, we'll find out if it helps me, but I think it will.
But isn't the mindset a little different too in the national lab, that it's more,
Oh, right,
you
it's
can
not
look
just
at,
profit
you can look
driven.
at the specifics of things. So I
Yeah.
think that's the main differences in like, Genentech, there were projects that I talked to my manager about that I'm like, oh, I'd like to go through this field. And he'd be like, well, I mean, how is that gonna help us, like, as a company? And national lab, they'll be like, you can do that if you
Well,
think.
they're still deliverable.
Okay,
Like, they have to
yes,
have
but-
papers out, and people specifically target topics that are hot so that they can get funding and
Yeah.
so on. Like, everything's really paper driven. Like, as soon as I got there, they're like, okay, well, you're gonna develop this and then make these figures for this paper. Like, the project wasn't just like, okay, we're gonna study this.
Yeah.
And mine was a little bit different. My national lab was DoD based, and their mission in a way was to do tech transfer. So they were kind of doing the basic research, building up to something where they can say, okay, well, here's this idea, we don't know much about it, let's do some fundamental and applied research and build up to a point where then we can transfer over to some of our industry partners. So I don't think, to answer your question, obviously if you go to industry, if you get an industrial internship, it's gonna help you get a job in industry, but not having that industrial internship isn't going to like curtail you, because at the end of the day, it's still a professional development opportunity.
I mean, ultimately, it's just, it's a change of pace. Working where, even the national lab, like you guys had deliverables, and you had strict deadlines that you needed to meet. And that's just getting experience working in that kind of environment in a more team-based culture is, I think, whether that's in a national lab or at a company, it will help you, just even from a professional development standpoint, just like Ishan was saying.
Yeah, one thing I learned, and I mentioned this, I learned to be more efficient, because, so this is a DoD setting, you know, my email address, I had no access to my work email outside, which was great from like a work-life balance, but at the same time, that meant that when I was there, I had to work, and when I left, I couldn't do anything. And where I lived was 45 minutes away, minimum, without traffic, to where I was working. And I had to take the shuttle service, so I had to wake up by a certain time to get the shuttle, to get to work on time, and then I had to leave work at a certain time to take the shuttle back. And I couldn't have any access, I couldn't read up papers or anything about that, so I had that narrow time period to get my work done. And then you're working with teams, so there's a lot of cooperation as well, so it really helped with time management.
Min Young, you had a question?
No,
Okay.
I'm good. I have, but,
Any other questions?
Yeah. So sort of in terms of like the work-life balance, how much harder, or do you work the same amount? Do you have to work in industry to really get what you want out of the internship?
I think it depends on the company. I know, like, I think Genentech is pretty good in terms of work-life balance. Though I did have some all-nighter events, but that was just due to the project and the experiment that I was running, that I had to do that. But they were cool with me taking like the day off the next following day. So it wasn't like they expected me to be there. I wish for the internship I could only work a strict 40, though I'd work a little bit more, but on the time clock I had to put in 40. I don't know how it was for you guys, but
We had time sheets.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we couldn't go overtime or anything like that. So 40 hours a week is pretty good for a work-life balance, I think.
Yeah.
But my internship was in Seattle, so I had lots of time to go around in the area. So I'd recommend it for everyone in terms of that.
Similar.
San Francisco?
Did I-
You said Seattle.
Sorry, San Francisco. Sorry. I was talking to my undergrad because she's visiting Seattle. So that's in my head. San Francisco.
Yeah, Boston summer is great.
Boston winners though.
Yeah. Albuquerque summer's not as bad as you think.
At least it's dry, right?
Yeah.
So I was in Dallas and I got to experience the summer as well as the cold because I was there for the summer and the fall. And I saw hail there as well during the fall. As an international student, obviously you can't work more than 40 hours, we already know that, but like there are many HR issues which go into it if you like overstep that limit. So first of all, work-life balance was obvious because I was an international student. And over that, they used to hold like parties every 2 weeks or stuff, so every 2 weeks. So that after you finish your work, you directly have to head to the party. So there's no option to stay longer even if you intend to. And in an internship environment, you don't know everything. So you'll always need the help of someone around you for specific things. And other people won't be working, just like you after hours, they're not grad students anymore. So like for example, I had to go to an analytical characterization lab to go to do SEM, EDS or something like that. And those people had strict timings, like 9 to 5. And 5 p.m. the doors lock. So you can't do anything, even if you want to get work done. And you just have to come the next day. So it helped me in terms of prioritizing things and working around people's time schedules. Because some people used to work from like 6 a.m. to like 2 p.m. and just go home after that. And it was fine with TI's work policies. And I used to be the guy come at like 8:30 and leave at around 6, 7 depending on how the work is. So if I had to catch that guy after like 3 p.m, it's impossible. So working your way around thing helps you a lot. And work-life balance, it again depends, what kind of structure you are based in. But usually people in industry are flexible with PhD students. They know how you are a grad student.
Yeah, I had to share certain resources and areas of the lab with other people that were on a different time schedule. So like for example, some person came in and they left by 1 p.m. and we had to both share that area. So that person needed that area in the morning at a certain time. So I couldn't do that type of experiment in the morning. That's something I had to do in the afternoon. And something you'll encounter here as well, but it's a lot more, I wouldn't say rigid, but you'll encounter a lot more situations where people are working very specific hours, and you have to learn to cooperate with that.
And some technicians are paid hourly as well.
Yeah.
So you need to work with technicians and not just grad students or employees who are working at that organization. So technicians also, they don't spend even an extra minute if they don't have to, usually. So you have to be mindful of everyone's schedules.
How did you know that the work that you're going to do will fulfill your interests? If so, like, if you already knew that you're going to like that job, then how do you figure it out that will fit well?
When I got an email, they said, hey, this is the project and what it's doing. Are you interested? But that was, again, like kind of someone sent my resume around and they like emailed me specifically about the project. So I looked at it and I was like, okay, so I see how some of my skills fit into this, and then I see how it's actually going to grow me in these other ways, and then I was interested in talking to them more, but I don't know if that's unique amongst your guys' experiences.
I didn't know what I was getting into, really.
Same here.
Basically I just applied for the molecular oncology department job. There was a few other interns in that department, and they had slightly different projects for me, but I was happy with my project. I just mainly wanted to get more experience in the cancer field, and that was one thing I got lucky with in getting the internship, because I had no experience with it before, and I think that was the one thing that kind of put me on the lower tier compared to others, but I think other parts of my resume boosted me up. But I don't know, I think I could have gone into it, got a project I didn't like, and maybe took some positive things away from it. I don't know, I always look at the positive over the negative when I look at things, so it's different from everyone, I guess.
So if you're in an industry, you will probably never know the project till you actually land in the organization because you are not technically hired by them and you haven't signed the non-disclosure agreement yet. So you are a risk for them in terms of sharing exact project details. But in my case, what I knew was the overall theme of the project. Like I knew they were doing some 3D printing, some materials development, and they told me that everyone is hired in this research lab for their PhD expertise. So I looked up the PhD thesis of the people I was going to work with and got to know like, okay, vaguely what they're going to be working on. But when I came in, I got to know the application. Because you know the process that they will probably use in, or like just the rough idea of it, maybe not the exact description of the process, but the application is usually known when you enter the organization. So in most industry internships, I think you won't know the exact details. But if you like the overall theme, you like the company, you talk to a couple of people on the organization and you like their attitudes and work dynamics, I think that's more than enough to make a choice.
Just something to add, and this is also going to kind of address something that Adam said earlier, where, you know, he stressed the value of finding something that you enjoy doing, especially with industrial internships. I'd say 9 times out of 10 companies are not going to tell you what exactly you're going to be working on when you go in because, yeah, like Dishit said, you haven't signed an NDA yet, and they tend to keep their technology, they play it pretty close to the chest. So, where was I going with this? But, you know, that shouldn't deter you from applying for something, and even if you get a project that you don't like, take it as a positive. You know, you've learned about something that you don't enjoy doing, so that when you go forward and start applying for jobs or another internship, you know to steer clear of it. There are always positives that can be taken from these kinds of experiences, even if they seem abysmal at the time.
I mean, yeah, it's just temporary, so
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Just to add one more.
That's true, but it's guaranteed temporary. It looks less bad than quitting a job after, you know, a few months.
And
Yeah.
people in industry as well as in national lab settings, they understand that there's timelines to things, and they're like, you know, for one thing, there's deliverables, certain things you have to get done. You should mention a failed fast approach, and then they also realize that if you're embarking on something, like if it's a more research-based thing, that, you know, you can spend weeks on something that doesn't work. It doesn't mean the idea was bad or something like that. Or maybe it's because the idea wasn't as good as what we thought it was or something like that. But they understand that, and they don't see this as you doing a PhD. Like your value isn't tied always necessarily to exactly working. Like, for example, the project I was on, the initial thing was, okay, by the end of this month, we'll have this data set. And every week, getting that data set proved to be harder and harder. I still got some discoveries and things done that added value overall to what we were looking at. And then the end of the internship, I actually did not generate that data set that was originally assigned to me, because it was a lot harder. The system that we were looking at was a lot more complicated than we thought. And that itself ended up being the valuable thing in that. And then my supervisor said, like, yeah, you know, this, you know, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but we gained that other parts of it.
In this transition from academia or grad school to industry, were there any habits that you had to unlearn to adapt quicker for your internship?
Being cheap. You have to know how to spend money and quickly. Yeah. My supervisor told me, he's like, don't come ask me for permission to buy things unless it's expensive. And I thought he meant like if it was $50 or $80. So I would ask him the first week, and he's like, and then he said, unless you're spending more than $300 per week, just go ahead and get it. And the great thing, I don't know if it was for you guys, but we had a trade shop. That was amazing. I mean, you needed like a machine shop as well as like a supply shop. So like say now you want beakers or something like that. You go through Marketplace, you wait for it to come. Instead there was like a room like this, you go, we had to fill it up things by hand, but you just ask and then you can get it by like 2 p.m. and that was amazing.
We
Yeah.
had Sigma Aldrich and Thermo Fisher Scientific next to our lab. So that we just go there, get gloves, like no regular supplies. I'm not saying that they keep all the chemicals you want, but regular solvents and everything, they have it on site. So
I think, yeah, I remember first thing I ordered was a bunch of antibodies, and those things are about 300 a pop, and I ordered like 10, and like they didn't blink an eye at it. So, like, I don't know. It's just like, I was like, are you sure about this? Because, you know, before antibodies are a big expenditure, but for those companies, it's just like they have so much money that they can just kind of. But these are all bigger companies. I mean, if you intern at like a startup or something like that, it's going to be kind of different. You're going to be very scrupulous. And,
It turned out also that, similar to ordering things, that my organization had a contract with all the carriers for like 1 day or overnight delivery. So it was like the same rate or whatever contract. So if you actually like put in like, oh, it's fine, I want 2 day shipping, they'd be like, why? Just get it tomorrow. Or like I waited one time for a week for it, and they're like, there was no need, it actually doesn't even cost us more money. It's the same amount. You might as well just take advantage of that contract and get that tool tomorrow.
another thing is the first couple days I couldn't do anything because I had to do all the like orientation, safety stuff. That was a pain because you're limited in time. I think mine was 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, and so that first week just seemed like a waste. So that was kind of frustrating, but you're getting paid for it, so I guess I can't complain too much. And then another thing is you just kind of have to have an industrial mindset. So for me, it was a company that was trying to make profit, so a lot of the ideas that I had to think from a different perspective. But that was just
So
me.
that's a good point here. Like if you are thinking of doing an experiment, you don't have to read 10 research papers and then go in the lab. Just read 1 or 2, get a grasp of what you want to do and what you need, and try it out. Because they don't have time. You know, like you are paid hourly, so every penny and every dollar is important for them. So if you spend like 2 days just reading research papers and third day you do the experiment, it doesn't work out. You know, that's a problem. So you can't do that for every experiment. Quick learning.
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask if anybody had an industry internship in undergrad, and if there were actually additional skills that you feel you might have completely missed from those kinds of internships, that it really is that much more beneficial to have one in grad school, or if you might have already gotten that sort of insight to a company.
So I actually interned with Eastman as an undergrad, or one of their subsidiaries up in Massachusetts, in the R&D department. But I guess there are 2 questions in there. One, did I get something different out of it? Yes, I was in a totally different role. As an R&D intern, as an undergrad, I was essentially a lab tech, an underpaid lab tech. So I would sit in front of a rheometer for 8 hours a day, just running samples. When I interned as an R&D intern for Eastman as a PhD student, you're given a lot more freedom to work on, or basically direct your own research. You're less tied to samples that people hand you and say, go do this, and you get a little bit more flexibility. And a lot of internships at the undergrad level, I feel, don't even deal with research. You know, typically coming out with a bachelor's in chemical engineering specifically, you're more than likely going to go into being a process engineer, right? That's kind of the bulk market for BS chemies. And so, yeah, it gives you a very different perspective on, like, let's say the same chemie bachelor interns at Eastman would be working in the plant, managing processes, whereas as a PhD intern, I was working in Building 151, doing, like, in the lab, doing research. So they're just very different roles.
I didn't have an internship, but I can tell you based on, so at the end of the year, they had like posters throughout for everyone who did an internship, and there was tons of undergrads at Genentech doing different things. But I think just the amount of responsibility on you is different and heightened when you have a PhD, and the project that you have is a lot more complex compared to an undergrad or something like that. Like I know no undergrads would be hired in the research department at Genentech. They would have more kind of less complex jobs. And nothing against that, but it's just the amount of experience that we have, I think, translates, and they know that, and so they can be like, you're gonna do this, and you're on your own on it. And you know, you'll have questions and stuff, but mainly they want you to solve it on your own. And I think it's just that difference, in my opinion.
And I come from India where I did my internship as an undergrad. That's not valued here. So obviously you start from a clean slate in my situation. The good part that I realized as an R&D intern was, you are more like a system engineer rather than a process engineer. So you get to dictate and orchestrate the whole process rather than be like the guy who just runs samples, as Joe mentioned, or checks like thicknesses of samples over time and just gives the data to other people. Like I was told specifically that if other department contacts you saying that, oh, you are an intern, right, do this sample for us, you have to say no. Because they don't know like you are here for a specific project and you might be given that responsibility without being asked. And obviously you are in a new organization, you want to help as many people as you want or as you can. So you'll be like, oh yeah, sure, I can do this for you, but then they're like, no, you are here for a specific purpose and every second matters of you being here. It's more structured than like a lab tech running samples.
Okay, I think we'll end it there.